Hello and welcome to our Pillar to Post podcast. My name is Naveed and I'm your host today. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Dr. Zaf Iqbal. He's currently the head of sports at Crystal Palace Football Club. He's also worked with other Premiership clubs including Liverpool and Tottenham, and we're going to be talking to him about his experience over the years. Dr. Zaf, welcome to our show and thank you very much for joining us.
We're seeing some nice footwork out there as the ball makes its way down the field. But hold on, pillar two post, out of nowhere, amazing! Goal!
Dr. Zaf, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for arranging this.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. And this is quite unique. I was reading more and more about your history, and in terms of what you've achieved, it's quite unique, especially in the early stages where you didn't hear about involvement in sports. Let's go back a little bit. You went to study medicine. What made you study medicine?
So my initial introduction into medicine was really probably my family. So not only my family was involved in medicine, but I had a sister, unfortunately, who had brain cancer. So from the age of 10, I saw her going into hospital over the next 6 years, and I saw the care that she received in the hospital, and that is what initially sparked my interest. And so ever since the age of 10, I said I wanted to be a doctor and really try and continue the work that I saw other doctors doing, for my sister, and try and, that's really what inspired me in the first instance.
And it's always that spark, isn't it? That's something that touches you personally from that point of view. And after you graduated from medical school, you specialised in rheumatology, I believe, and was at the University of Bath. Is that right?
No, so I did some further. That was a little bit later on. So I did a postgrad diploma in rheumatology, but initially I was going to go into orthopaedics. So I quite as I progressed through medical school, I had various different ideas in terms of what I wanted to do. So when I got into medical school, initially I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, following on from what happened with my sister. Then as I progressed, I wanted to go into pediatrics. And then when I left qualified, I wanted to go into orthopedics, and probably because of the fact that from a very young age, my dad always used to get me involved in DIY, and I always saw myself as somebody who could fix things quickly. I enjoyed orthopedics, my rotations, because you saw quick results. So you saw people who were previously quite well enabled, they'd have an injury, they'd have a fall. As a result, they'd get disabled quite quickly. So the opportunity to be able to help them quite quickly was quite appealing to me.
I was reading also the fact that you had a knee injury yourself, and it didn't go well in terms of how the treatment was, and you saying you gained weight and so on. Was that another sort of motivation in some ways for you to sort of go towards this career and specialize?
That's right. Well, that's what got me into sports medicine. So I enjoyed, like a lot of my friends, I enjoyed playing sports. So five-a-side football, we used to be playing 2-3 times a week. And I unfortunately did my ACL, so anterior cruciate ligament, which is one of the main ligaments in the knee. And I injured that. And although I was qualified at the time, I went and saw one of my orthopedic colleagues, and I was told that even though I was a doctor, the waiting time was 18 months. This is back in 2002. Obviously, times have changed since then. But I was told that physiotherapy was the first line. I would have to wait anything up to 18 months for an MRI scan and to start going down the physiotherapy route. Now, in the NHS, again, the physiotherapy that I was receiving was once every couple of weeks. And after a few months of this, I was getting quite disheartened, gaining weight. And I thought, here I am. I'm involved in the profession, and this is the care that I'm receiving. I just felt that if I'd had another serious medical problem such as diabetes, heart disease, there's a set pathway, and doctors, and at that time and in medicine, there'd be far better care that I would receive. Whereas if I get an injury, all you really advised is take some anti-inflammatories, rest, stop playing the sport, and have some physiotherapy. So then I undertook some further studying. I did an MSc in sports medicine at Queen Mary's, which I completed in 2005, and that's what then continued my career in sports medicine.
I see. Excellent, excellent. And we're going to come on to your time with Liverpool, which many people have been asking about, and also as well as Tottenham Hotspurs as well from there. Now, in terms of when you were just going back a bit, when you obviously you said you were as the interest developed with your sister's illness as well. Was there ever a pressure on you, even being from an Asian background? Because I'm Pakistani myself, you're Pakistani. Was there an extra sort of added pressure at all at any point?
Look, there always is. We know that, and my dad's dream, I think, as soon as I was born, was to be either a doctor, engineer, chartered accountant, or dentist. So it's pretty standard. All my father was a bus driver. Mum had a corner shop, and their aim was really to try and provide for his kids. And all my father wanted to do was make sure that I had a better life than he did, as most fathers do. And so that was it. So he didn't really say, look, you have to go into medicine. Initially, he really wanted, I don't know where he got it from, wanted me to be a civil engineer. That's all he ever used to go on about. But ultimately, it was a case of, look, just study, because that's one thing that he always told me, that nobody can take that away from you. Once you have an education, no one can take that away. And so that was it. He really, if there was any pressure, it was just to do well in his studies.
I see. I remember my dad, he wanted me to be a car mechanic. So I don't know if he was kind of disappointed with that from there. You know what, it's interesting, you mentioned the cruciate ligament. That's what got me a grade in my GCSE, because my uncle told me about Paul Gascoigne's cruciate knee ligament, and it took me a good couple of days to pronounce it properly and so on. And I remember at high school, I said to my teacher, cruciate knee ligament injury, and he was quite impressed. And that was my spark. I think so. That's what I'd like to say. And that's what I said in my interview. Before we go into Liverpool, in terms of this COVID crisis, because that's what is on the current issues at the moment, what's your thoughts? How you, for example, do you think it's being managed well? Do you think, have you yourself adapted well?
It's a difficult one. So I've been at home working from home for the last 3 weeks. So I've been doing lots of online meetings, consultations via Zoom like this. And the other reason why we've been staying at home is also, unfortunately, one of my kids has got a heart issue, and so we've all been indoors, and we just got to make sure that he doesn't pick anything up. In terms of, from what I've seen and have heard, it's probably similar to what everyone else has done. Unfortunately, it's been shown that it's a very contagious illness, and we do know that the majority affects is the elderly or those with previous health issues. That's not to say it can't affect other people as well. And so, unfortunately, as I said, the main problem that we've got is, normally with things like flu and viruses, you expect them around winter, and here we are in spring, and we've got this illness, and it's obvious how much it's affecting the whole country, because everybody's having to do something which is unprecedented. Everybody's having to stay indoors and adapt, and it obviously is very difficult. Alhamdulillah, I'm in a fortunate position where I can work from home, but I know there's lots of people who can't work from home, and it must be very difficult, because obviously their livelihoods depend on them going out and working. But that in itself causes a problem, because that's how, unfortunately, it can spread.
It is, yeah. It's been a shock, and even in the medical world, we're struggling. And although we'd like to put on a brave face, we're adapting. We're just confused. Yesterday, for example, I was examining a child in the car with a mask and so on, and the child looked frightened, thinking, who is this person approaching me? We're still trying to look for ideas of how to manage, and in the community you can see the confusion and the fear. They say, everyone's saying it now, it's become a cliche now, that life's never going to be the same again, but it just seems to be the case. Right. So then, okay, like I said, we wanted to give somebody a bit more sort of a light-hearted discussion in terms of aspirations, because life will continue in terms of our aspirations, and that's something that we don't want to dampen as well. So tell us your journey to Tottenham Hotspurs and then Liverpool. How did that happen?
Sure. So once I completed the MSc, it was a case of now what? And so what I wanted to do, I was still playing football at the time, was to try and set up clinics in the NHS, so sports medicine clinics in the NHS, to try and help people similar to myself. So there were lots of what we call weekend warriors, lots of people who were playing amateur football, and they didn't really have anywhere to go. So I started working in an NHS sports medicine clinic at Queen Mary's initially, then set up an NHS clinic with Dr. Ian Beasley at Newham Hospital, again in East London. And through that, we set up various pathways where people through A&E, accident emergency, and local amateur clubs whose players didn't have private healthcare were able to access our services. And then from there, other people, I think, started hearing about me. I also set up something called the FA Medical Society, which was a educational conference 4 times a year for other doctors and physios. And the main purpose for this was to try and educate other doctors and physios, because the pathway in sports medicine is very different to other specialities. And so where you go for your information is usually either books or other doctors who have had or been working in the game for a long time. And whereas in other specialties, you learn that through the hospital and you get access and you learn from your peers. So I then set up the FA Medical Society, and through that, again, my name got out because I was organising these meetings, getting specialists from around Europe to come and present and try and find out what best practice was. From there, I got an opportunity to work at Leyton Orient, which was a League Two football club at the time. And I took it really, I was only asked to go in for games. So it was really to cover the games, but I took it upon myself to go at least once a week on a voluntary basis, sometimes twice a week. And just to try and follow up on players when they did have injuries at the weekend, was to try and follow up and try and, some of the practices that I'd learned in my clinic, to try and give them some of the care that otherwise they wouldn't have received. And from there, I was made aware of an opportunity at Tottenham Hotspur Academy, applied for the post, and fortunately got the post there. So I was working there for 6 months. And again, I must have done something right, because then an opportunity came up with the first team. I was asked to apply for the post, and again, I must have done okay in the interview, and was working at Tottenham Hotspurs for best part of 3 years. And again, that was quite an eye opener to be thrown suddenly from the sports medicine clinics, Leyton Orient Academy, and then the first team. And we were in Europe at the time as well. We just won the League Cup against Chelsea, so that was actually my second game. We played them, and in 2010 was quite fortunate to be at Man City at the Etihad, where we beat them, and Spurs for the first time qualified for the Champions League. And just when I thought, right, we're going to have some Champions League, another opportunity came up at Liverpool, where they were revamping the medical department there. And Peter Bruckner, who's quite a famous sports medicine doctor from Australia, was heading up the department. And I was asked if I'd apply for the post, so I applied for the post. Really, I did it, if I'm being honest, was to try and negotiate a better pay package with Tottenham Hotspur, because my family was settled in London. So I had real no intentions, even though I supported Liverpool, I had no intentions of moving to Liverpool. And I got through the interview, and they offered me the post. And so I was in a difficult position. So I went back to Tottenham Hotspurs, went backwards and forwards. And as I say, to this day, I still maintained I wanted to stay at Tottenham Hotspur, but the offer and the opportunity at Liverpool was too good that eventually I accepted. And my wife, she wasn't too keen on it, so she stayed in London. So for the first couple of years, I was commuting back and forth. And then I became the head of the department when Peter Bruckner moved on to Australian cricket. And then it became quite difficult, because I was trying to commute back and forth. Wife was here settled, all her family network was here. And so I managed to stay up in Liverpool for 3 more seasons. But then when we got in Champions League, then that just made it very difficult because I was hardly seeing the kids and family, and eventually something had to give and move back.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. I mean, I've noticed that family's been a major part of your life. And again, it brought back memories of myself. When I used to work in East London, I'm from the Northwest, and I worked at King George, and I used to travel home every weekend. Every weekend, it used to be 5 hours north, 5 hours back, and it was tiring.
Yeah.
And I definitely, I can sympathize from that point of view. And so family's been a very important part, which we'll come on to later as well. So while you were at Liverpool, I think most of my questions I've been getting are from Liverpool. Obviously, you were quite close to some of the football players like Steven Gerrard, Luis Suarez, and so on. How do you develop such a relationship as a doctor with a football player? What's it like? Because for me, I can't even imagine it because I have the usual patients. But with a football player, does it take a unique skill, a unique set of rapport? How do you do that?
It's a difficult question because I have been asked in terms of, when you go in, are you overawed? To be honest, when I go in, they just want to be treated as a patient or as a player. And what I found was that as much as possible, I would be straight with them. And most of the players appreciated that. And certainly the likes of Steven Gerrard, who I got on with very well, did appreciate that. He also had a few quite well documented issues at the time in terms of injuries. He was very unfortunate to have quite a few injuries. And I suppose I was the doctor that was there at the time. It could have been any doctor who could have probably built up that relationship. So as a result of those chronic injuries that he'd got, and he's written about them in his book as well, one or two of them which could have potentially been career threatening. As I said, myself and the physios and the rest of the medical team happened to be there at the time, and we helped him through it. And I guess he was quite appreciative of that, and as a result of that, we built up a relationship from that. And that's been the case, all the clubs. I mean, even at Tottenham Hotspurs, there were quite a lot of high-profile players there as well. Gareth Bale, Luka Modric, Leslie King, Jonathan Woodgate. And again, with these guys, quite a few of them had quite serious injuries. And again, because I was able to help them, that helped build up the trust and the rapport.
I see. Were you under constant pressure because you've got your fans on one side, you've got the manager, of course it's a multi-million-dollar deals and so on, and were you under a lot of pressure all the time?
It is. There is definitely, because every weekend, everything builds up towards the weekend. So you have to try and get everything right for the weekend. So there is constant pressure because either trying to get players back, and so, as anybody who's worked in football will tell you, that 90 minutes on a Saturday or a Sunday, I don't think there's anything that can prepare you for that. The emotions that you actually go through. It doesn't matter which team you support, when you're actually working in that environment, you try and stand back from it, but you know how important those 90 minutes are. And, I've had some incredible moments. 1 minute you're literally on the floor, and then 10 minutes later something can change and everything is completely changed, and you're high up there. But there's constant pressure to try and get things right. But to be honest, I put that at the back of my mind, and it's just a case of doing the right thing. And I try not to get influenced by people from outside. So obviously there will be pressure, because at the end of the day, the manager wants as many players as possible. And my thing has always been, you've got to do what's right for the player, because if you buckle under one instance and you don't do what's right, either you'll get it from the player or the manager, because once you give in at one point, then the next opportunity that similar situation arise, the manager will then again say, well, actually, you changed your mind, you changed decision previously. So you've got to stick to your guns. You've got to do what you feel is right for the player, because ultimately, as with any patient, we're their advocate. So that has led to conflict lots of times, sometimes with the players, sometimes with the manager, sometimes with the club. But I'd like to think I've got more decisions right than wrong, and the clubs that I've worked at and the players have appreciated that.
Excellent. I mean, so again, you touched on it in your answer there. When you're on the pitch, do you develop an instinct? So, for example, when a footballer falls or is injured or tackled, what goes through your mind at that point in terms of, your reaction and so on?
So to be honest, you're right in the sense that during the game, I can never really relax because you're constantly watching what's going on. When a player falls, you're constantly ready. I'm quite lucky. I've always had very good physiotherapists that I've worked with. So most injuries, the physiotherapist will go on first. We're always mic'd up, so they will replay back. They'll initially assess the player. If it's a serious injury, if it's a fracture, dislocation, concussion, I will either go on straight away because you'll get an instinct as to whether something serious has happened. I will run on immediately with a physiotherapist, and if it's a serious injury, I'll usually take the lead on that in that case. But the majority of injuries, which are soft tissue injuries, the physiotherapist will be first on and they'll manage. Even with the head injury, usually the physiotherapist will get on first, hold the neck if it's suspected. Over the last couple of years, we're even more fortunate where we've got access to video replay. So we will have another physio in the stands who's able to replay the injury from different angles. So they're able to tell you while you're with the player what the mechanism is, and that often helps. Certainly, we've seen instances where players have fallen down and it's been unclear as to whether there's been a concussion. And I feel for the doctors at the time, because what you see on the bench is very different to what you see on TV. You may not have seen how a player has fallen, how the player has reacted. And by the time the doctor, the physio has run on there, they may be awake and not obviously concussed. Whereas if you see the mechanism or know what the mechanism is, you may handle them differently. So certainly the introduction of replays has helped us massively.
I see. Again, I'm putting you on the spot, but is there any throughout your career, what's been your most difficult decision? Again, you don't have to name the players, but what's been your most difficult decision? Again, as a medic, I'm asking this because a lot of medical students are watching this as well. What's been your most pressured decision where you had to make a decision on the spot, and the most difficult?
I think probably the most difficult one has been when a player has been possibly concussed, okay, and the player is adamant that they're fine. So certainly early on in my career where I didn't have access to the video replays, a player had a collision, probably clashed heads. And by the time I've got to them, the player themselves saying, I'm fine. And there's just an instinct that something isn't quite right. They've not been knocked out. So somebody who's completely unconscious, that's quite straightforward. You just board them and they're going off. So there's no issues. When a player is a little bit, how can I put it, groggy, and you're asking them questions, they're answering the questions, but you just feel that you need that little bit more time. Players desperate to get back on the pitch. The manager's on the sidelines with you, telling them why can't they go back on. And that was quite difficult early on. To be honest, over the years now, that's made much easier, because at the beginning of the season, I will tell the players that, look, if you have a clash of heads, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. And it's been helped by the awareness in the game as well. So referees will allow you more time in the centre of the pitch as well, actually on the pitch. So you get more time assessing the player as well. It was much more difficult previously where the player would be sent to the sidelines immediately. And so then you would have to do your assessment on the sidelines. And of course, then you'd have a lot more pressure. In terms of injuries, when it's a serious injury, again, that's quite straightforward. It's obvious that the player can't continue. Sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult when a player pulls up and the player is adamant that they can continue. You can see that they're not quite right, but it may be the start of the game, and those decisions can be difficult. But again, what I've always said to players is that if you feel that you've got an issue, go down. The game will get stopped. don't continue, and at least that gives the
Makes
opportunity
sense.
for you to assess them.
I see. Okay, we've heard it first. Doctors telling them to go down, but obviously I can totally understand why. I think that's some good advice. Out of curiosity, because I'm in the NHS, how quickly can you get an MRI scan? For me, I think the average wait is about 3 years. That's a joke.
Yeah.
How much of an access do you have to these scans?
So no, look, at the end of the day, with all the players are private healthcare through the club. There's central private healthcare schemes that all the Premier League clubs have. So literally, I can get the scan in an hour, that if it's required. But we have ultrasound machines. So some of the doctors who work in the Premier League are specialised in sports medicine, and so I have an ultrasound machine which I've been using for a number of years now. And so initially with soft tissue injuries, they'll be assessed by the physiotherapist and myself, and I will then do an ultrasound as well. And based on that, our assessment and ultrasound will decide if and when they need the MRI scan. But we've got access to various private hospitals, and we can get an MRI scan the same day, not a problem, if need be.
Wow, that's just my dream. That's my dream. What's your thoughts on, I mean, we were talking about injuries, and I was thinking of Fabrice Muamba, who suddenly collapsed, and he is a footballer who had hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. And the reason why that incident stuck with me also was that the cardiologist who was there, Dr. Dina, he was my supervisor in East London when I was a junior doctor. And they highlighted the issue of scanning football players. Is that right? Did you have any issues like that? People with heart problems or cardiac issues in any of your career? Did you meet any players?
So I can't speak about specific players, obviously.
Of course.
Some have been highlighted. So Fabrice Muamba, if I remember correctly, so that was my colleague. So I was at Tottenham Hotspur. So Shabazz, who was my academy doctor at the time, and then when I left for Liverpool, he then became the first team doctor. So what happened there, I don't know. We still don't know exactly what the cause with regards to Fabrice Muamba was. And so it looked like he had, didn't look like, he had obviously a cardiac arrest. And again, that's a testimony to the fact that the medical services in the Premier League and through football has changed over a number of years. I think that changed really from the Peter Cech incident a few years prior to that, where he'd had the head injury. I think it was at Reading. And since then, it was made mandatory that there should always be a doctor and physio sat on the bench. And at Tottenham Hotspurs and all the Premier League clubs, they have that. They also have 2 paramedic teams as well. And really what made the difference was the fact that the doctor, Shabazz, and also Jonathan Tobin, the Bolton doctor, and the physiotherapist and the paramedic team were able to get onto the pitch and start CPR immediately. And that really was the key, and also then put the defibrillator on him. Now, from what I've read, I think they were continuing that for up to 70 minutes. And I think Dr. Dina was in the crowd, but what his main role was because of the fact that he worked at one of the hospitals, he was able to ring ahead. So he was able to ring ahead, and that at least provided a pathway for easy access, because that's a tertiary hospital. They'd normally, he would have gone to the local A&E, which I think was North Middlesex Hospital. But as a result of Dr. Dina being there, he was able to transfer directly to the London Chest, and then they were able to, I think, do cryotherapy in terms of cooling the body, and that obviously helped him as well.
It's quite remarkable.
In terms of my own, there have been a few documented cases of players with known heart issues. All you can do in that case is you get the opinion of the cardiology specialist. So I work with a few specialist cardiologists who work primarily with athletes and have done lots of research. One of them is Prof. Sanjay Sharma, Dr. Neil Malhotra, and when I was at Liverpool, John Somaru. But there are a few up and down the country. And we get the advice of those consultants. And then it's really a case of giving the facts to the player that, look, there may be an increased risk with regards to you continuing playing, and also making the club aware of that, and then putting measures in place. So at the end of the day, we can't stop a player completely from playing. That's a risk that if they wish to take and the club wish to take, that's up to them. So our role is to advise as much as possible, unless it's clear that the risk is just far too high, that we say, look, you stepping on a pitch is going to have detrimental issues to yourself.
I see. Okay. Now, in terms of
it's probably the most difficult conversation you have to have with a player.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the whole future is depending on that. Absolutely. In terms of all the football players that you've met and worked with, is there, again, it would be quite nice to know, is there any one or two particular footballers, or you can name several, who've left a positive influence in your life and still in touch with them today, and how they've been off the pitch, and people who you developed a close relationship with?
I'm going to state the obvious. I've had good relationships with most of the footballers that I've worked with, and I try and keep in touch with quite a few of them. I'd probably say Steven Gerrard is the main one, not only because he was one of the best players that I was fortunate to have worked with, but more in the case of what he is as a person. He was just excellent to work with. You look at all the footballers that I've worked with him as well, and everyone holds him in such high regard, because not only of the way that he conducted himself on the pitch, but off it as well. He was very straightforward. To be honest, he didn't say a huge amount, but he didn't have to, because he just led by example. And, you look at all the other players, Torres, Xabi Alonso, Suarez, all of these players, even though they've played abroad and they've played with some other amazing players, they still see him as the captain, and they still hold him in such high regard. And I guess, again, because of my relationship with him following his injuries, he also helped me with quite a few things in terms of, so I worked with a few different charities and a few health projects as well. So one of the health projects I used to work in was trying to encourage kids to increase their physical activity. And he once came in just off his own back into a school to try and promote the project as well. And whenever I've needed something for various charities that I've helped with, he's always been very forthcoming with that. The other one is Suarez as well. I had a good relationship with Suarez. We all know his antics on the pitch, but off the pitch, he was an absolute gentleman. Again, whenever I needed something in terms of his boots, he was always, willing to donate them. And the great thing was, he'd always come and ask me as well, how much they raised and stuff. He was always interested. And one of the things that I'll never forget was, so when I used to fast in Ramadan, he was always one of the first players that would come and tell me that, Doc, it's time for you to open your fast, just in case I'd eaten.
That's amazing.
But he was
brilliant.
Off the pitch, as I say, he was amazing. But one of the other key things that stands out was at Newcastle, when we were playing Newcastle while I was at Tottenham Hotspur, and Jonathan Woodgate arranged something which I'll never forget. And so iftar was 5 minutes before kickoff. So we were in the physio room, in the changing rooms. Manager Wande Ramos was giving a team talk, and there was a knock on the door, and the security guard walks in with his big platter of food, and he says, "This is for the Doc." And the manager's like, "What the heck is going on here?" So suddenly this huge platter of food goes across the changing rooms right over to me in the corner. And it was actually organised by Jonathan Woodgate when he used to play there, because he knew that was fun. I hadn't asked him. He knew that I hadn't eaten at the pre-match dinner, and so he very kindly organised for some food, which, as I say, was quite humbling. And
SubhanAllah, that's amazing.
I really amazing.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely reassuring that there are, you see, these are things we don't hear about, and that's why we've got amazing people like you to share that. Thank you for that. So then you're currently with Crystal Palace. Would you say family was the primary reason then? Couldn't persuade them to move to Merseyside, Northwest?
There was no chance. So my wife and kids, and look, I'm not going to, this in no way um, uh, reflecting negative on my wife. She sacrificed a lot. She was a doctor herself. So once I
Right.
started in football, she soon quickly realised that she worked as a GP, and I couldn't be consistent in terms of picking up the kids from school, and so it was very difficult on her. So she said, "Look, if you're going to go down this field, then." She very kindly sacrificed her own career for her. She'd studied just as hard as me, if probably not harder than me, and so she said, "Look, she needs some stability at home." So she decided to take a break, a career break, and then as I said, so I was working at Tottenham Hotspurs. That became almost full time, as well as doing other clinics. And then when I moved to Liverpool, that was obviously a shock because she had no intention of moving anywhere. All her family's network was here, but at the same time, we've got alhamdulillah, three lovely kids, and two of them have known heart issues. And so that was obviously an additional burden. So that's why she wanted to stay down here. So I couldn't, certainly when we moved in Champions League, there was just no way that she was going to move up. And it was becoming more and more difficult. So at the end of the day, Liverpool is a massive worldwide club, and they obviously need commitment from their side. And they'd also been very good towards me, trying to do everything to try and accommodate. But unfortunately, something had to give. At the end of the day, Liverpool need somebody there full time, and I wasn't able to give that. And at the end of the day, my family needs me as well, and I recognise that now more than ever over the last 5 years since I've been back.
Zaf, that's truly inspiring, because a lot of young Muslims are watching this, and there's a lot of marriage discussions taking place, and this is quite a hot topic, and that's absolutely amazing, where you were a husband as well, and a father as well, and despite Liverpool being, you were a fan of Liverpool as well, you sacrificed that for your family, and that's truly inspiring. And thank you for sharing.
I'm not going to paint myself completely in a bright. As I said, look, at the end of the day, my wife had sacrificed a lot.
Of course.
So if anything, the fact that I'm actually able to continue the work in football was due to her. So when I came back from London, I said, right, that's it. I'm not going to go back into football. I'll be doing sports medicine clinics. And then I got contacted by Crystal Palace, and Brendan Rodgers actually got in contact with me and said, look, there's an opportunity at Crystal Palace. They're looking for a sports medicine doctor to try and improve their department. And I had no interest of going back into football because I'd been doing it for the best part of 10 years. And I was quite fatigued, and I really wanted to try and make up with the family the time that I'd lost, just do sports medicine and try and have some normality, because in football, it pretty much is 24/7. You lose all your weekends, and so you don't have what other people may consider a normal life. There's lots of positives. I wouldn't change my job for the world, but what others may see as normality in terms of, things like birthdays, weddings, all those sort of things, you miss out on a lot of those because of work. So the opportunity to at Crystal Palace was too good to turn down.
Of course, and all habits die hard. So you with Crystal Palace, and also with Bashar, I have to say this properly, Peshawar Zalmis. Right. You with them, and this transition also. Well, I don't know if it's a transition, because you had the skills, the generic skills. You've moved into cricket as well. What's your role with the cricket team?
So that came about really because while I've been working at Crystal Palace, we have Kent Cricket Club, which is just next door to us. And so they asked me to look after some of their players as well. So I've been doing that for the last few years. But Peshawar Army came about because there was a few Pakistani cricketers that had got some serious injuries. And unfortunately, the care in Pakistan, from what I hear, is probably not of the standard that really should be for elite athletes. And so a couple of the players had got in contact with me and said, look, we've had these injuries. Would you mind helping us? So I said, look, you're over there, I'm over here. How's this going to work? So they actually came over to London, stayed a few weeks, and fortunately was able to help them. They were relatively straightforward problems. So one of them had an issue where he hadn't played for 18 months, and an issue that he had, to be honest, could be managed quite straightforward by any sports medicine doctor here. And within 5 weeks, we managed to get him back playing. And 6 months later, he was part of the squad that won the ICC trophy. And so that was probably one of the best phone calls I'd received afterwards once they'd won that. And it was just him thanking me. You know, the fact that he thought he was never going to be able to play cricket again. So that was quite humbling and rewarding. And one thing rolled into another. And so although when we say working with Peshawar Army, it really is from a distance. And I've just been giving advice now and again.
I have to ask you, Zaf, if Imran Khan contacted you and asked you to lead the Pakistan team, would you consider it?
I couldn't get my wife to move to Liverpool, so there's absolutely no chance that I'd be moving to Pakistan. I actually went just last year was the first time I'd been in over 10 years. So I was born in Pakistan. The only other time that I went there was 2005 and 2007 when the earthquake happened. So I did a voluntary medical camp then. But I had no real interest in going back. And then last year I went back because my brother got married out in Islamabad. And at the same time, I thought I'd take some cricket in. So I went and saw the PSL final and saw a couple of the cricketers as well. But as I say, I love my job here. I'm staying in London certainly until until our kids have left the house.
Of course. Is your wife a cricket fan at all?
No, she's not. She's not. She doesn't like football. She likes sports, but she likes playing it herself. So she prefers more squash and badminton. But certainly football and cricket, as far as she's concerned, she doesn't mention. She's quite happily we'll play in the garden with the kids, have a little bit of a kick around, but she has no interest in football or cricket.
Right, I see. Right. And the last topic I wanted to talk about, and it's a topic it's in the news, and again, a lot of young Muslims who will be watching and listening to this, it's on their mind as well, is the rise of identity politics and so on. Have you felt over the years, as a Muslim from an ethnic background, that have you felt that the increasing need to justify your role in society, to highlight that more than usual, rather than, as opposed to say your skills doing all the work, now you're having to justify that? Has it been, you noticed that yourself?
Not personally myself. It's a difficult one because again, I get asked and I hear lots of other people who will talk about the fact that they feel they've been prejudiced against. Look, we know there's lots of racism within society. There's lots of Islamophobia in society. Clearly there is, and unfortunately it's increased over the last few years. I've seen and witnessed that myself outside the football club. Within football itself, I've been quite fortunate because I'd like to think it's been whatever I'm providing in terms of my skills has come first and foremost. And so my religion has never been an issue. In fact, it's, I wouldn't say embraced, but certainly it's been accepted. So I don't, at all the clubs that I've worked at, I won't personally go to the Christmas function because of the fact that there's alcohol there. That's my personal choice. At Liverpool, we had Brendan Rodgers, because there were other Muslim footballers, we had a prayer room organised. There's halal food on the menu. And then again, even at Liverpool, another story. Remember when we won a League Cup then again there, the players stopped me from going to the changing room because of the fact that they knew that there was going to be spraying champagne about, and they actually moved one of the players, moved my clothes out of the room so none of my clothes would get splashed. So to be honest, as I say, I've been quite fortunate in that instance. So But that's probably come back because they've seen how hard I've worked. And as
I
long as
see.
I'm doing my work right,
Yeah.
then nothing else has been an issue. And my religion, certainly at the football club, it's never been an issue. And if anything, I've been allowed, given the opportunity to make other people more aware of it, and it's been accepted, and that's just as who I am. And we've had at all the football clubs that I've been working at, there've been other Muslim footballers that have been there,
Yeah.
and we have something in common there as well. But other players are made more aware of that, and I suppose that can only be a good thing. Unfortunately, outside in society is a different matter, you know. And what is sad that I am seeing scenes which were similar to when I was growing up as a school kid. My dad, when he was a bus driver, the racism that he experienced, I'm now seeing outside, and people seeing it as normal to shout racist and Islamophobic comments. And, you know, I was hoping that in this country, those sort of days had long gone.
I see. I mean, what was your conversation like with your children? Because you know, when you experienced racism when you went to Sellers Park, what was your conversation like? And I know you've been over the incident, but I'm curious. I mean, it must have been quite upsetting for your children. And
it was a difficult one.
like?
So it wasn't that directly, wasn't anything to do with football. I know one of the newspapers picked it up and made it out that it was due to football. So I was dropping. It was the first time I was taking my kids to Sellers Park. And so I was dropping my kids off to my friend who was going to take them, and they lived nearby. And so as I was walking to my friend's house, it was my daughter who heard one of the young kids make the comment. And I heard it, but I thought, no, I haven't heard that. So I carried on walking, and it was a 3 or 4 year old kid. And his dad, I could hear his dad scolding him, saying, "Oh, I've told you not to say those things." I'm like, well, where's that kid picked it up from? And anyway, my daughter, who was 12 at the time, said, "Look, Daddy, did you hear that?" And I just tried to ignore it and pretend it didn't happen and just walked on. Afterwards, I had a chat with them and said, "Look, unfortunately, there are always going to be people there who are a little bit silly. And unfortunately, you know, those sort of people, we can't let them affect us in terms of how we work. And all you can try and do is continue doing the good work and set yourself as a good example. Don't react to it." Because when I look back, I thought, should I have reacted? Should I have said something to the father? But then I had my own kids with me. What if we'd got into an altercation? So I ignored it and went about my way. And all I say to my kids is, look, we're very fortunate to be living in this country. Just try and be the best person that you can and be a good example and lead by example. And, you know, don't allow other people to use your religion as a reason to actually be negative towards you, when in fact it's your personality that they're trying to be negative towards. So be a good person, and ultimately there's more good people than there are bad people in this country.
And would you say you'd give similar advice again to a young Muslim watching this, who's probably feeling under pressure and is reading the news and is constantly under scrutiny and so on? Would you, I'm assuming you'd give the same advice to carry on and try your best at whatever you do? And
it is, look, as a Muslim, if you look at the practices of being a Muslim, it's what a good human being should be. It's about working hard. It's about being good in society, and it's about helping a fellow human. And if you take those characteristics, no other good human being could say those are bad things to have. Those are good or bad characteristics to have. So unfortunately, there are always going to be negative people. There's always going to be negative situations. But the main thing is how you overcome those, because wherever I've worked, there's been lots of difficulties. But to be honest, I seem to manage to block them out. So when I was working in sports medicine, I didn't really see what the next step was. But I must have knocked on 100 doors. I must have done so many, you know, voluntary work. But all I remember is now is those doors that did open. And that's only because of my perseverance alhamdulillah, because of my faith and my parents' du'as, but also, you know, the help and assistance from those around me. So my, you know, immediately my wife, my family, and my friends who've supported me throughout. So what I would say is, look, just continue working. I think in this country we've got unbelievable opportunities, and as long as you do your work right, and as long as you show that you're a hard worker, then almost anything is possible.
Beautiful. Beautiful, very powerful words there. Dr. Zaf, thank you very much for joining us. It's been truly an honor and an insight for me. I was keen as soon as I was told that this is the role. I just said, this is me. Give this interview to me. And thank you very much for that. And thank you for your time today.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Take care.
All the best. Take care.
And there you have it. And there was Dr. Zaf. Thank you very much to our listeners and viewers. Please continue to share our videos. Please continue to spread awareness. And please also, if there's any suggestions that you want to make, if there's anything, any comments you'd like to make, please get in touch with us. Like I said, we're relatively new and we're learning all the time. And this is what we want to do. We want to bring people who've achieved this level of success in their lives so that we can give that inspiration, so that we can make sure that if you're somebody young or old even at any point in your life looking for that positivity, that's something that we can bring to you. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. My name's Naveed and I was your host today.